Oh, you're here. Good. I was hoping for company. You see, I've got stories, dark ones, chilling ones, the kind that keep you up at night. Mythical creatures, curses, horrors you can't escape. Shall we begin? Don't worry, I won't bite. Much.
This story takes place in a remote village surrounded by mountains, where a man named Hao lived. Hao had a reputation for being both lazy and addicted to gambling. Despite being in his 20s, he had no stable income and relied entirely on borrowing money from friends and relatives. His reputation was so terrible that even his family began to distance themselves from him. One night, after losing all his money at the gambling den, Hao wandered aimlessly through the village. As he reached the cemetery at the edge of the village, he stumbled upon a strange sight. By one of the gravestones stood a paper bride, intricately painted with delicate facial features and dressed in a traditional red wedding gown. It had been prepared for a ghost marriage that had yet to be completed. Seeing this, Hao suddenly had an idea. This might just work, he muttered to himself. I could take this paper bride home and tell everyone I've married a wealthy woman. They'll think I've turned my life around and lend me money again. That night, under the cover of darkness, Hao carried the paper bride back to his shabby hut. He placed it in his bedroom and covered it with a thin blanket. The next day, he spread the news around the village, claiming he had married a woman from a distant village. Curious neighbors came by to visit, but Hao made various excuses, saying his wife was unwell and couldn't meet anyone. At first, the lie worked. Hao successfully borrowed more money, claiming it was to care for his ill wife. However, as days went by, strange things began to happen. Hao often heard faint rustling sounds late at night, like someone moving around in the house. He dismissed it as rats or the wind and didn't think much of it. One night, as Hao lay in bed, he was startled awake by the sound of soft footsteps. His heart raced as he realized the sound was coming from the direction of the paper bride. Paralyzed with fear, he stared into the darkness. The footsteps stopped right beside his bed. Summoning his courage, he slowly turned his head and saw the paper bride standing next to him, its painted eyes staring directly into his. Before Hao could scream, the paper bride's mouth began to move. In a light, hollow voice, it asked, "Why did you bring me here?" Hao was too terrified to respond. The paper bride tilted its head as if studying him, then turned and walked back to the corner of the room. The next morning, Hao convinced himself it was just a nightmare brought on by stress and exhaustion. But the strange occurrences grew more frequent. The paper bride's position would change when he wasn't looking. Sometimes he found it standing by the window, gazing out into the night. Other times, it seemed to be closer to his bed. One evening, Hao returned home to find the paper bride seated at the dining table, as though waiting for him. Terrified, Hao decided to burn the paper bride. He dragged it outside and set it on fire, watching as the flames consumed its delicate body. However, as the last ember died out, he felt a chilling wind brush past his ear, accompanied by a faint whisper. "Did you really think you could get rid of me?" That night, Hao's house grew so cold it felt otherworldly. He could see his breath in the icy air, and the empty room echoed with the sound of a woman's laughter. When he entered his bedroom, he found the paper bride sitting on his bed, completely untouched by the fire. Its painted eyes now gleamed with a malicious light. In desperation, Hao sought help from the village shaman. After listening to Hao's story, the shaman frowned. "You have offended a restless spirit," the shaman said. "This paper figure is not just paper. It's a vessel for a ghost bride seeking a husband. By bringing her home and treating her as your wife, you've made her believe you are her chosen partner." "What can I do?" Hao pleaded. "There is only one way to appease her," the shaman replied. "You must complete the ghost marriage ritual and fulfill her wish. Otherwise, she will never leave." With no other choice, Hao followed the shaman's instructions and conducted a ghost marriage ceremony, complete with offerings and prayers. During the ritual, Hao could feel the paper bride's gaze fixed on him, cold and unsettling. As the final prayer was spoken, the paper bride suddenly turned to ash, leaving behind a soft sigh that lingered in the room. It seemed everything was over. However, Hal was never the same again. He quit gambling and became a quiet, reclusive man who rarely left his home. The villagers whispered among themselves, saying that Hal still felt the presence of the ghost bride, watching him from the shadows to ensure he never strayed again.